Hi everyone, I'm reading Gorilla Dreams by Sue Hampton. I'm going to introduce this book and see if you would like to pick this one up later as you see it on the bookshelves. For everyone in his class, Mr. Eden was much more than a teacher. In fact, he was an acrobat and an actor, comedian and storyteller, all in one. Ryan thought he might also be a wizard in his spare time. Anya said teachers didn't have any spare time, but she thought he was a sweetheart and a hero. Ryan and Anya lived on the same street. The two children weren't best friends, but their mums were like sisters, and their mums both wished they'd been to Mr. Eden's class long ago. He's awesome, said Anya. He's a legend, said Ryan. Mr. Eden was very, very funny. He knew how to make 30 children laugh loudly and happy until their eyes were warm and wet with their stomachs felt tight. But he also knew how to make them stop laughing the moment he wanted them to. Mr. Eden was super fit. He could slide up and down the ropes that fell down from the hall roof like a bead on an abacus. He was happy to be chased around the playground or football field, but no child ever caught him, unless he pretended to be a spider with a few missing legs, or a jellyfish, or a Christmas pudding. And in dance lessons he taught Ryan, Anya and the other kids all kinds of different moves. He could jive, he could waltz, he could do the tango, the samba and the Charleston. But most of all, Mr. Eden loved ballet. When we dance, we tell stories, he said, without words. Mr. Eden said that if the children listened carefully enough, they could see colours in great music. He loved story time, and sometimes he sang or hummed his own soundtrack to the books he read. At the same time, he shaped his body, his face and hands into pictures. He's so funny, said Ryan. He's insane. Anya laughed too, just as loudly as Ryan. But she'd noticed something else about Mr. Eden. Sometimes when the story was sad, he very nearly cried. She could see it in his eyes when he was nearly crying too. Anya liked his tears that didn't quite fall, even more than she liked his craziness. He's sensitive, she told her mum. Anya liked that word because Mr. Eden had used it to describe her in a report, along with deep. No one, said Ryan, was sensitive, but he was full of what Mr. Eden called bounce. For Anya and Ryan, story time was the best time of the day. One afternoon, Mr. Eden had finished reading a book, one that had lit up the whole month as brightly as Christmas. The children asked what the new story was going to be. Ah, said Mr. Eden, and he made his eyes extra wide and very bright. No book today, he added. Oh, groaned the children. No story? Mr. Eden, you must be joking. Mr. Eden tapped the floppy, fair hair on the top of his head. I'm not going to read a story, he said. I'm going to tell you one. Yay, cried the children. Mr. Eden didn't have to ask them twice to tidy up and sit on the carpet. Ryan and Javine had never cleaned the paint pots so quickly. Anya and Lucy had never wiped the tables so fast. Ready? Asked Mr. Eden. Yes, called 30 children gathered on the carpet at his shiny, pointy feet. Steady, said Mr. Eden, and wobbled like a tightrope walker over a chasm. The children laughed. Mr. Eden crossed his hands in front of his chest very quickly, and the laughter stopped. He stood still for a moment, his mouth open as if he was waiting for something in the silence, listening for it, looking out for it. Go, he cried. Mr. Eden was an athlete running from the starting block. Then he remembered that he was still at the beginning of a story, not a race, and stopped still. He stood up more like an ape than a man. He walked back to the story chair with his knuckles almost skimming the ground. This is a story that no one has heard before, with a main character that isn't human. Mr. Eden's face didn't quite look human anymore. His nostrils grew wider and his eyes stared. He looked wilder than usual. It's a gorilla, said Ryan. Mr. Eden became himself again and nodded. The children were enjoying the story already. Some of them made noises that were more like steam engines or crows than gorillas. Mr. Eden held out a hand, and they waited silently. A gorilla that wanted to be, said Mr. Eden, and paused. A ballet dancer. He did a twirl on the spot with his arms meeting in an arc above his head, while his face pretended to be a gorilla face, and his body pretended to be heavy and hairy. Everyone laughed. What kind of story do you think it is? Asked Mr. Eden. Yes, Ryan. What do you think? A funny one, said Ryan, grinning. A mad one. Mr. Eden stroked his chin and looked sideways up to the ceiling. It can be, yes, said Mr. Eden. This story can be a total fantasy, the crazy kind. It could be about a gorilla called Gilbert, and all his mates at Gorilla School, if you want it to be. It sounds as though most of the class wanted that very much. But, said Mr. Eden, and held out one hand in the air with his fingers opening like petals from a bud to a rose. The children waited. It doesn't have to be, he said. It could be a story of a gorilla called Sanyu. That's a Ugandan name, and it means happiness. But this Sanyu could be sad as well as gentle. Anya remembered seeing Mr. Eden's beautiful wife. Anya's mum said Mrs. Eden was from Uganda, and Anya was sure she must have a pretty name. It could be a story full of strange, beautiful magic, said Mr. Eden. It could be all about us. The room went silent. For Anya it felt as if the magic had already happened. What do you think, Anya? He whispered. Which story shall I tell you? Is my gorilla Gilbert or Sanya? Anya's smile was shy. Sanya, she said quietly, and she already was sorry for the gorilla with the sadness in his eyes. Ryan? Asked Mr.